Here to celebrate another win, Joe?
Actually, it's 10 in a row, and I lead my fantasy league by 13 games.
But you think fantasy baseball is just an office water cooler game? Hey everyone, this is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. This edition, I am going to go to part 3 potentially of this book, The Baseball Timeline, because I've been having so much fun with it, and it has forced me to, just pick out certain time periods in baseball and just enjoy learning about the 20s, 30s, and 40s as I did on my previous 2 episodes. So if I have time, and I think I will, I'd like to peruse that by just luck, picking out a page, or by surprise, picking out a page. But what I want to talk about today, and I thought it's interesting, my brother Jim sent me an article because I was telling him that the Reds have already played, and we've only reached about, I would say, the 1/3, 54, about 60 games to the season, so there's 100 left. So you would say that we've reached about 38% of the season. Well, the Reds have played in 6 1-0 games, and it seems that's all they were playing in at the very beginning of the year, specifically April and May. It seemed that way. Well, I went back and took a look at the Reds season so far. They've actually played in 6 1-0 games, and they have a record of 2-4. Now, they are over 500 right now. I think they're 37-35. They've gotten hot of late. I don't give them a chance. I always believe there's a chance. They are a good 6-7 games behind first place in the National League Central. My brother is much more optimistic than I am. We had a long hour-and-a-half conversation about the Reds the other day, and basically he kind of cheered me up. He says, they do have a rash of injuries. I get it. Their pitching has been, for the most part, sensational. Hitting has been a problem, especially with their one great player who I love, De La Cruz. He has been improving, but he still strikes out too much. Been playing great shortstop in my mind. Every time I see him, he's making some fantastic play. He's got a gun for an arm, and I hope, and they have been. My brother always reassures me because he follows the team much, much, much more than I do. I mean, every box score. And he has said that the Reds are basically leaving him alone at short, which I love. He had played third for a while there in the past couple of years. Anyway, the Reds, he feels, are improving. I said, do you think they have a playoff shot? Outside shot. Actually, Baseball Reference gives them about a 5% as we go into broadcasting or taping this show. So I'm going to say this. I'm happy. The All-Star break is less than a month away. I am happy, and I say, okay, they just need that one hot streak in July and then stay there. And as I offered my brother, I said, okay, if they're 2 or 3 games out, are they going to make a deal? Now that, of course, we were both kind of on the same page with the Reds. We don't know. And we're not trying to sweep that question under the table without giving a response, but it would be interesting. Would they go after a stud player? Maybe in the latter stages of his career. I'll tell you who. I don't think they would, but let's just say if Mike Trout were available, would the Reds be in on that? Or would they say, no. Even if, let's say, the Angels paid a certain amount, a certain percentage of his salary. I don't know. And that's the kind of stud player I'm talking about. Would they go after a Justin Verlander? Just to shore up the pitching staff. And that's where the Reds concern me as one of their fans. I don't think they're sometimes all in that way. Now, ask yourself, Yankee fans, because I know I'm deep in Yankee Nation land and with the Mets as well. If Trout were available, do you think the Yankees, well, you know that George would go after him. Do you think the Sun would go after Mike Trout if he were available under the same, let's say, parameters that the Reds would be under? I would say yes, they would. And I think the Mets would too. So that's where our conversation was going. We were talking all things. Then we started talking about, as I said, the 1-0. And I was kind of using that point. They can't score a run. Every time I watch them, they can't score a run. And then all of a sudden, they lose a game 1-0. I tell my brother Jim. And then they come out and they bash, 30 hits and win the next game 18-1. Then they lose a game 3-2. They can't get the runner in. And that is the frustration of any baseball team. Don't misunderstand. Every baseball team has those woes, has that problem, has the frustration. But when it seems to happen, the perception is when it seems to happen to your team more, you kind of complain like I have. So anyway, my brother then, lo and behold, finds an article by Joe Posnanski, who is a writer for Sports Illustrated, has written a number of wonderful baseball books. And of course, I can't think of any offhand right now. And I do believe he was a huge Reds fan growing up. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he's a huge Reds fan. Anyway, he decided to do this essay on 1-0 games, something that my brother and I were just chit-chatting about. And he was talking about that the 1-0 game is really becoming well, I shouldn't say this. It's becoming a dinosaur in this respect. And I'm going to use one guy as an advantage here. He was talking about how the 1-0 game, where both pitchers complete the game, are a thing of the past. And this article, I said I had to check the article. The article was written in 2011. So you're talking about 14 years ago. And he was saying, and I'm going to quote him, "Oh, the 1-0 game as a team effort is actually making a bit of a comeback. There have been 51 of them in 2011 so far this year, which is certainly more than there were throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. There were 62 1-0 games in 2010, the most in baseball since the 1970s. But even in 2010, only 10 pitchers threw the complete game shutouts. 10 different pitchers, I might add. As we all know, pitchers just aren't staying in the game to throw all 9 innings. Even pitchers throwing the shutout in 1-0 games are getting pulled. In June, for instance, the Pirates beat the Astros and used 6 pitchers to do it. 6! This is how the game has evolved. So he goes on and talks about the loss of the 1-0 game and the fact that pitchers really aren't completing games. And he goes back to 1968 and he says this. Ready for this? So with the parameters in place, who's the greatest 1-0 pitcher in the last half century? I think actually there's a 3-way tie. And by the way, I just have to say this. When he does do this article, he doesn't count the 1-0 loss. Let's say a pitcher might suffer if he only goes 7 and then a relief pitcher comes in. Well, today I'm going to do one particular study on Burt Blyleven, who he does mention in the article. And I include all his 1-0 games for his career. It's kind of interesting and kind of, mind-boggling to say the least. And anyway, he talks about probably the greatest 1-0 pitchers. And I think in a way you can kind of guess. Sandy Koufax is the greatest 1-0 game pitcher. He won 10 of them in his career. He actually went 10-0. And so he says of the 10 games, 4 were against the Cardinals, by the way, and 2 were against the Cardinals' Bob Gibson. I think the joy of the 1-0 game is that, as I wrote about stats a few weeks ago, it tells a story. Koufax versus Gibson in the heat of May and June, once in St. Louis and once in L.A., throwing impossibly hard fastballs, both knowing for inning after inning that one run would probably win it, that joyful baseball. I've written a million times that pitchers don't win and lose games by themselves, and they don't. Not even when it's Gibson and Koufax in a 1-0 game, but it can feel that way. It can feel like a pitcher against a pitcher, and when the game takes on the tension of the final round of a close game, a 5th set at Wimbledon, and then Gibson strikes out Koufax and end the threat, Ken Boyer lashes a single off Koufax, but gets caught stealing. And then Tommy Davis settles the deal. Those are my words. Hits a ninth inning home run to lift the game. That's wonderful baseball. And it is. And then he goes on. It's just a fantastic article. So I just want to get down to this and see where you think I'm coming from or where I'm going with this. Here are then the top 10 pitchers who have won the most 1-0 games in the last 50 years. Top of the list, Bert Blyleven with 14. Dean Chance with 13. Gaylord Perry, 12. He's tied with Steve Carlton, 12. Fergie Jenkins, 11. Nolan Ryan, 11. Maddox, 11. Koufax, 10. Palmer, 9. Sutton, 9. And ready for this? Also tied for 9th place, Jerry Koosman. So all you Met fans, and we always talk about Jerry Koosman being a really good pitcher, 9 1-0 games in his career. Now, with the exception of Chance and Koosman, every one of those players or pitchers I talked about or is listed by Posnanski is in the Hall of Fame. So you start to say to yourself, there's got to be a connection between winning 1-0 games and being a Hall of Famer or cusp Hall of Famer. Now, the article does go into depth about Dean Chance and what really a wonderful pitcher he was. And he did have arm problems, which really ruined his career. And, of course, Koosman was he was the lefty answer to Tom Seaver. Different pitchers entirely, but great. Well, Koosman was a great pitcher. Now, I don't know with the metrics we have today whether he'll ever be considered for the Hall of Fame, but you got to remember he won 20 games. He did lose 20. He was, in my mind, the MVP of the '69 World Series. Won probably the most important, I shouldn't say it's the most important game in Met franchise history, but certainly one of the most important games in franchise history when he evened the series in Baltimore in the '69 on that Sunday, October 12th, with a masterful, 2-1 or 2-0 win over Baltimore to even the series. Because if the Mets went back, I think, to Shea down 2-0, even if they won 3 straight there, it would have been awful difficult maybe to go back to Baltimore and win 1. Okay? You're talking about a Baltimore buzzsaw team. Yes, the Mets had all the luck, you can argue. Yes, but without Koosman's second game win, it's definitely a different series entirely. I just want to go back to Dean Chance because I think it is interesting. Now, here's Chance, who pitched for the California Angels and the Minnesota Twins. In fact, he started the '67 All-Star game with the Minnesota Twins in Anaheim. How weird is that? Strange is that? Oh, I just want to give you this. Top winning percentages. Sandy Koufax is 10-0. Greg Maddux, 11-1, 917. Steve Carlton, 12-2, 857. Don Sutton, 9-2, 818. He's tied with Koosman, 9-2, 818. Dean Chance, 13-3, 813 winning percentage. Nolan Ryan, 11-3, 786. Jim Palmer, 9-3, 750. Mike Cuellar, 8-3, 727. And Gaylord Perry rounds out the top 10. He's 12-5 with a 706 winning percentage. And again, the only non-Hall of Famers listed there, Jerry Koosman, Dean Chance, and Mike Cuellar. And I tell you, I am really surprised that Mike Cuellar isn't given more consideration. I know that his career, without a doubt, went on the upswing as soon as he was traded from Houston to Baltimore in the prior to the '68 season. In fact, I'm going to show you something on this. Here's Cuellar's record. Cuellar, prior to the '69 season, he was traded over the '68 season, a big addition on that team. Cuellar moves into the role in 1969, probably the top lefty on their team, wins 23 games. Don't understand why his WAR is so low, 26.9. He won 185 games, lost 130, has a 3.14 ERA. I know he pitched in two big pitchers' parks. It actually came up in St. Louis and Cincinnati before that. But he did pitch in Houston, where he compiled a 2.74 ERA, and he pitched with Baltimore, where he had a 3.18 ERA. He had a 6.19 winning percentage with the Orioles. But ready for this, with Houston teams from 65, 66, 67, and 68, he was 37-36 with a 2.74 ERA, including a 16-win All-Star season in 1967. I believe he hurt his arm, and the Orioles were taking, let's say, a chance on him. They traded Kirk Luthery, a one-time Rookie of the Year, for them to get Cuellar, and I don't think you would argue that that was a lopsided deal going for the Orioles. Weaver worked his mastery. His pitching coach, I think it was Ray Miller, worked his mastery with Cuellar, and he did win a Cy Young while with Baltimore, I do believe. In fact, I think he tied in 69. Yeah, he tied in 69 with Denny McLain, number one. Then he finished fourth, and then he finished sixth another time, 1974, when he won 22. This is a guy who won 4 20-game seasons. And you can argue all you want, well, he played with some great Oriole teams. All right. And I would say this. For me to say this, it's hey, Maddox plays for some great teams in Atlanta. Bob Gibson played for some great teams in St. Louis. So to me, that throws a, and I'm even thinking, did Cuellar help make them with his 20 wins a better team? 100-win team 3 years in a row? A 20-win season? It's few and far between now. Anyway, that's my point with Cuellar. So then I went back, and I was thinking, my brother and I said, I'd love to see how many 1-0 games have been spun in when I think about it, because the first year you think of, whenever I think about pitching, I think of 1968 because it was the year of the pitcher, and baseball made huge modifications on the pitching mound, lowered it from 15 to 10 inches prior to the 69 season. It was also a year in which they expanded by 4. They had never done that before. They expanded by 2 and then 2, obviously, with the Mets coming up with the Astros in 60, where they called 45s in 62. And, of course, the second version of the Washington Senators coming up in 61, along with the LA Angels, their brother in expansion arms in 61. But anyway, so then I said, I have to ask, how many shutouts were thrown in 1968? And there were 82 in the American and National League. So then I was looking, and I'm saying to myself, wow, you would think that maybe it was more. But if you think about it, I was actually eye-popping with this, all right? So there were 38 games in the American League of 1-0 ball games. The leader of it, the team involved in the most 1-0 games, was the Chicago White Sox, and they were 7-9 in 16 games. When you think about it, 16 games out of 162, that's 1/10. That's about just a little under 10% of your games in 1968 were 1-0 affairs. And Posnowski, in his article, talks about the rarity of the 1-0 game being a complete game, let alone actually happening. And here are the Reds and this is where it goes back to me with the Reds. They've already played 6. So then I'm looking, I'm saying, all right, there were 38 in the American League. That's really about 3.8 per team when you think about it. Or let's say, obviously the record is 38-38. So you say 76. So it's about 7 per team, okay? Baltimore was 4-2. The White Sox were 7-9. And the Yankees were 6-4, including, ready for this, winning 2 games back to back in '68 over the White Sox, 1-0 and 1-0. Now, why I say this, in '68, Detroit, which won the pennant and then the World Series and had the last 30-game winner in Denny McLain, of all the teams, they played the fewest 1-0 games in the American League. They played just 2 and split them. I was amazed at that. And then I'm saying, well, probably because they had one of the best offenses, obviously they wouldn't be involved in 1-0 games. None of them involved McLain. And I'm doing a quick perusing of this, okay? Now, why do I say all this? The list of guys that Posnanski comes up with is amazing. He does talk in length about Frank Taniana, who is really a solid pitcher. And actually, his research does indicate that Taniana was a really good pitcher playing for a really bad team. Now, he's not as big on the wins and losses as I am. However, he does feel this way, obviously, that when you're playing on a good team, you're probably helped by wins, obviously, or the team behind you helps you win games. I'm not in disagreement of that. That's why you'll see me take a look at some of these guys who are playing for inferior teams, sub 500 teams, and I say, hey, the guy lost 19 games and won only 10, and his ERA was maybe 3.80, and that's above league average. But then you delve in and you find out that, yeah, he was going against many times the ace of the staff on the opposing team, or the team behind him was not scoring as many runs as they normally did during the year. So there's a lot of elements that go into, yes, a pitcher's win-loss success on the mound. I'm not denying any of that. But Posnanski really does kind of prove what we do say, and that is there are certain pitchers that are great. And as a result of being great, and I'm not just talking about talent, but they're just great as in the mindset of being a pitcher, being able to figure out the strategy, the objective, and the tactics of a pitcher. And that's why they are winning pitchers, regardless of the team behind them. Guy I always constantly think about is Seaver. All right? The Mets were not that good in '67 or '68. You know, they were 71 and 91, I think, in '68. Yet he had winning records in both seasons. And in '69, I think you can argue that he led them because of his 25 wins to the championship. He's simply a great pitcher. And as I always say, okay, if wins and losses don't matter, and if those are purely kind of subjective, that you can't do anything about that as a great pitcher or as a pitcher going to the mound, then let me ask you this. You see this constantly. If you had a pitcher that you needed to win, notice, or to win, they usually say it, or that you wanted to pitch Game 7. I'll even give it that way, that you wanted to pitch Game 7 of a World Series. Everything on the line. Who would it be? And inevitably, everyone picks the all-time great pitchers. Nobody picks a tomato can. All right? My guy, and I've said this consistently, I think, I want Bob Gibson on the mound. All the time. To win my 7th game. He's proven it, 7-2. And I still say this, greatest pitching performance ever was that '64 World Series game, Game 7 against the Yankees, where he was basically running on fumes and won the game 7-5 in Yankee Stadium, I believe. All right? But if you notice, Bob Gibson won over 250 games, excuse me. Cy Young Award winner, all-star, great pitcher under pressure, winning pitcher. And he's my guy. I'm not going with, and this is nothing against any pitcher, I'm just picking out a guy. Nobody's going with Howie Reed or Ernie McAnally. Nobody's going with those pitchers. All right. They're going with guys who, and here's why they're winners too. Guy goes out on the mound. Everybody in the infield and the outfield has a different disposition, has a different body language, is up on their toes instead of flat footed because they know this guy is just brilliant. That's why he wins, even on his bad days. So then I was looking at this. So I was amazed. White Sox were involved. Kind of not amazed, though, as you think about it, because they had one of the worst offenses in the late 60s, early 70s, okay? But they were involved in 16 1-0 games. All right? The Yankees were actually involved in 10. And there were 6-4 of them. But after the White Sox was 16, and I didn't do the National League, maybe I'll do that next week, was Cleveland. They were in 12 1-0 games, and they had one of the best pitching staffs that year in 68. They were actually Louis Tiant led the league with a 1.60 ERA. It's still the lowest, I believe, in the American League history. And of course, it had to come in the year that Denny McClain wins 31 games and has an ERA also under 2. I think it was 1.97. And of course, it has to come in the year that Bob Gibson wins 22 games. And really, he won 13 in a row. And in 1968, and I think he was in a ton of 1-0 games, by the way. And I brought that up in the past. And Bob Gibson happens to have a 1.12 ERA. You got to go under a microscope to find it. And Louis Tiant picked that particular year to lead the American League with the lowest ERA of all time. So then I decided I'm going to take Bert Blyleven because there are many people, and of course, he's noted for having 14 1-0 games in his career. I did his entire career, including the non-quote-unquote complete games, where he went 8 or he went 7 innings and lost the game 1-0. To my surprise, though, I mean, it's amazing. Well, just start it up. Blyleven, of course, everyone crushes him in a way. Blyleven played for a number of teams, including had a big win in the World Series in '79 to help the Pirates beat the Baltimore Orioles. Blyleven, in his career, I've talked about this, 287, 250. Now, there are many people who say, oh, he's a compiler and all the rest of it. Had a 3.31 ERA, all right? Pitched basically after the mound was reduced. He pitched 4,900 innings in his career and had 3,700 strikeouts. And he did pitch. They were not good Minnesota teams. He did pitch. He was 10-9 his first year, age 19 and 70, when the American League Western Division champion Twins lost in 3 games again to the Baltimore Orioles, 3.18 ERA. He had 1 shutout that year. No 1-0 games. Then I just want to list. He won 16 and 71 at the age of 20. At 21, he was 17 and 17 in 1972 on a year that the Minnesota Twins, ready for this, they basically got old in a hurry and finished 77 and 77. But they were not moving up. They were going down. He wins 20 games and leads the league in WAR 9.8 in 1973. The team again finished 500. So he's 3 over 500 on a team that finished 500. Then he goes 17-17 again. He had 3 years where he had 17 losses. And I was thinking, and the team went 82 and 80. He never won 20 after that 1973 season, one of his 2 All-Star seasons. But ready for this? He won 17 twice more, 3 times more. He won 17 games, including 1989 at the age of 38 and finished 4th in the Cy Young. He was actually 17 and 5 with a 2.73 ERA. And that 17 comes back to haunt him because that 1989 season that he won 17, well, the year before in 88, he lost 17 with a 5.43 ERA. But he was good enough to complete 7 games. even with an ERA of 5.43. Not bad. And so for a guy, and the other year, 1985, he actually pitched for two teams. He went from Cleveland back to Minnesota and did again for Minnesota, winning 17 games with the two teams combined and had 16 losses. The number 17 appears in his career. It's weird. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times it appears, number 17, and I think it's totally justified and just plays out the romance of all this and storybook thing that he does finish a year 17 and 17, 1972 at age 21. Kind of wild. But anyway, I was looking at Blyleven's history. And Blyleven, ready for this? He lost his first 1-0 game and went the distance. He lost 1-0 and lost to Ray Culp. However, he beats Ray Culp in his second 1-0 game. And then in 1971, he pitches and wins his second 1-0 game, third decision in a 1-0 game, beating Skip Lockwood, who would later go on to be a relief pitcher and do a pretty good job with the Mets. Then in 72, he does have one no decision against the New York Yankees. A no decision. That means he's 0-0 and is finally relieved of his duties in a sensational game. You know why? The game went extra innings. He threw 10 innings, allowed only 7 hits to the Yankees, no runs, obviously, 6 walks, 10 strikeouts. Gets back on the track and wins 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 straight 1-0 games over the course from 72, 73, and 74. Beating Andy Messersmith, 20-game winner. Beating a pretty decent guy, Jim Slayton. Beating Clyde Wright, a 20-game winner for the 1970 California Angels. Beating Wilbur Wood, a 20-win man, a 20-loss man in the same season. Another pitcher, I gotta take a look at him and his 1-0 games. That would be interesting, him with a knuckleball. And Wood, I've told you before, I think he's got a 50 WAR lifetime. I wish people would take a look at him instead of because he had some really good seasons with the White Sox. Then he beat Paul Abbott, who would be a teammate of his on the 77 Rangers. In the 1-0 game against Wood, he would only pitch 8 innings. So he got relief help there. And then beat Milwaukee Travers. He beat Bill Travers by throwing 11 innings of no-run baseball. I mean, it was incredible how many extra inning games he actually pitched. Lost pitching 8 innings to a guy by the name of Jack Pacwa. He lost a 1-0 game to a guy named Jack Pacwa of the California Angels. Ready for this? Pacwa would go on to have a sterling career? No. Would go on to have a couple of seasons and a record of, let's say, 15 and 17 or something like that? No. He pitched 1 game and won it 1-0 for the California Angels. That was his lifetime record, 1-0. And he won the game 1-0 against a future Hall of Famer. And I'm probably wrong. He probably appeared in a couple other games. Don't misunderstand. But he won 1-0, and he just disappeared. Never to come up to the Angels again. Only that one season, and that happened to be 1975. He lost to Gossage. Then he beat Paul Mitchell and Ken Brett of Oakland and Chicago, respectively, by throwing 2 10-inning games of no-run ball. And by the way, the 1-0 games, all the runs were earned. Kind of strange, too, in his career. Lost to Nolan Ryan, threw 8 innings, 1-run ball. Beat Kansas City Royals' Andy Hatzler, who used to be a former Angel and also a Red Sox, by spinning 9 innings. And then he beat, in the National League, Craig Swan with 11 innings, no run baseball and lost a 5-inning affair to Vukovic of St. Louis in 1980. And then his last 3 games, he was 2-1 in. He beat Jim Beatty, ex-Yankee. He beat Jimmy Key, ex-Yankee. But he lost to Hall of Famer Tom Seaver. He threw 8 innings, 1 run. He lost 1-0 to Seaver. Overall, he had 14 wins, 5 losses, and 1 no decision. Interestingly enough, you talk about the 17 wins and the 17 losses. Well, ready for this? His first batter he ever faced was Washington Center's Lee May. The very first batter he faced, he surrendered his first home run to Lee May. And this was Lee May, who spelled his name M-A-Y-E, not the Lee May, M-A-Y, who played for the Orioles, Reds, in Kansas City. And his first strikeout was Ed Stroud, all in the Washington game, which he pitched 7 innings and allowed only 1 run. This guy Blyleven is pretty funny, with 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. The last batters he faced were Gino Petrelli of Texas. His last strikeout was Dan Peltier, and his last home run that he surrendered was Juan Gonzalez. And the first Hall of Famer he ever faced was Carl Yastrzemski. And when he faced him, he gave up a double. But this guy, this was a fun little assignment for me. But I think it does tell a lot, these 1-0 games, about the value of the pitchers involved in this. As I said, all those guys that we listed, and you could argue for Koosman, you could argue for Cuellar, the way it's going now, that they be reconsidered potentially, that the voters, the baseball writers, look at them again, because they were, in this respect, they were significant pieces of significant teams in baseball history. I don't think you can argue that the Baltimore Orioles, 3 times over 100 wins, and not only over 100 wins, but significant, 109, 109, and 108, won 3 pennants and 1 World Series in that early 70s, beat the buzzsaw Cincinnati Reds, who are seen as the team of the dynasty, and also beat an up-and-coming Oakland A's team in 1971. Cuellar was a huge reason that team did so well. And then Jerry Koosman was an anchor, another, the lefty, not the lefty version, but he was where you had Seaver as your ace. Here's your lefty Koosman coming in and confounding the hitters on the opposing teams, and being part of probably one of the most magical teams in the history of baseball, the Miracle Mets of 1969, by winning 2 games in that crucial World Series, especially that Game 2 affair. Just one other guy I wanted to do real quick, because I always felt bad for him, and that's Mel Stottlemyre. And he's one of the first guys that I remember because, as a baseball fan, he started the 69 All-Star game. Actually, I think it was going to be Denny McLain, but Denny McLain arrived late by helicopter and was not ready, willing or able, I guess, to take the mound. So it fell into the hands of Mel Stottlemyre. Stottlemyre was involved in 11 one-run games and came out the winner 6 times. And also, like Blyleven, threw a 10-inning game, beating Blyleven in 1972. He also faced Vida Blue and beat him in a 9-inning affair when Blue won the Cy Young and MVP in 1971. Blue, for that game, had 10 strikeouts and a 1.66 ERA by game's end. He lost to Mickey Lolich in 1968 by the count of 6-4. 1-0 games, and the history of it, courtesy of an article by Joe Posnanski, and just some fun reviewing and seeing it all. This is Will O'Toole with the 1-0 Park Ridge Sports History Show. Thank you for joining. See you soon.